Welcome to Keep Making Movies, the podcast where we explore, shall we say, movies that may have needed a bigger budget. We evaluate the movie for what it is, decide if it could have been improved with a budget, and if it'll join our Keep Making Movies official recommend list. I'm your host KJ, and with me is
Tom.
Today we are discussing Shinichiro Ueda's One Cut of the Dead. This is Ueda's third feature-length film, and last week we didn't do any first impressions because, audience, I hope you went and watched the movie. Otherwise, stop the show, hit pause. Okay? You're not here. You're going to go watch the movie. You're not listening if you haven't seen the movie. You need to watch the movie first. And now we'll do our first impressions. Tom, how was your watch?
It was good. I enjoyed this. It has a warm spirit. It's a lot of fun. We've seen things like this before. It's a sort of what we call a backstage comedy that comes from the theater, the backstage comedy or behind the scenes comedy. And it does something unique with that formula in that you are not led into the key that it's a backstage comedy. There's a sort of irony there in that you don't know you're watching a backstage comedy until after the entire comedy or the entire central plot passes. Then you get the acknowledgement that you're watching something backstage, that you're going behind the scenes, and really what you're watching is the context of the creation of this thing after you've seen the thing. Normally it works in the other way. You could think of Brian Friel's play Noises Off as a example that's similar but does it differently, where you get the first act, you know you're watching a play within a play, and you're getting enough of the act and enough of the potential places where problems could arise to introduce a little tension. Are they going to be able to make it through when you see the play repeated again in the second act and then in the third act where things really go off the rails? And so the comedy arrives from the fact that you as an audience member know how it's supposed to go, where potential problems could arise, and then you get to watch and see if those potential problems arise. He flips the script in this one. You have no idea. I had no idea. I knew nothing about this going in, other than you seem to adore it, KJ. Well, for good reason. That you have no idea that you're doing a backstage thing. There's a little bit of it in the sense that what the plot within the plot is that there are these filmmakers who are making a film, and then in making the film, the director wants to make it so realistic he puts a hex on the building they're in, and therefore these dead bodies arrives and attack everyone. But it's not until about 40 minutes in that you realize that film within a film is actually a film within a film within a film. And what you're going to watch then is, in the second act, the people preparing for it, getting it together and whatnot. And then in the third act, you're going to see the backstage of the first act. You're going to see the first act again, but from the perspective of the crew who are trying to engineer it and the people who are trying to deal with some of these problems. And it answers a few questions, a little awkward moments in the first act that you just think are the consequences of sloppy filmmaking, but turn out to have been part of this this potential catastrophe that actually kind of comes together. It actually kind of works. What about you, KJ? What were your first impressions?
So I watched this back in 2021. We have another show, Talking Pictures Trivia, and on that show we did a movie called Memories of Motsko, which I highly recommend, although that one is quite violent. That one you cannot watch with the family. And we had posted that on Twitter somewhere, and somebody came back and recommended One Cut of the Dead. So I jumped into it. Keep Making Movies wasn't even a thought yet. And when I'm watching, I'm like, oh, this is one of these great micro-budget films. And then, like Tom says, at 40 minutes in, whoa, it's a completely different movie than what you were told it was going to be in the first few minutes, which I thought was great. I thought it was absolutely wonderful. A year later, I said to my daughter, who was getting into Japanese movies, I said, hey, let's watch One Cut of the Dead. Don't worry, it's not too scary. She loved it. She laughed a lot in that third act. I really enjoyed the watch again today for the show here. So I love this film, Tom. As you say, I do. I adore it. So let's go through a brief plot summary, even though I think we've touched on most of it. But in One Cut of the Dead, we spend about 40 minutes watching a very, very, very low budget zombie movie. And then the opening credits of the movie are revealed. In the second act, we see everyone preparing to make the One Cut movie, which is the zombie movie we just watched. Then in the final act, we get to watch the insanity that was the making of the One Cut zombie movie in the lovely comedy of errors, where by the end we are cheering that they were able to finish the movie and pull it off. So, Tom, what do you think the goals of the creators were?
I think the goals of the creators were just that, to show the sort of haphazardness of trying to put together a single shot film and so on and so forth. I think the stuff that you normally get with behind the backstage farces is, I remember Brian Friel saying this when he came up with his with Noises Off, is that the stuff behind the stage ends up being a lot funnier than the stuff in front of on the stage, right? And that seems to be what's going on here. In front of the camera, things are whatever. It's a standard zombie movie, right? It's actually not even that interesting a zombie movie, really. What's in front
No,
of the camera?
yeah,
Yeah,
it
it's
doesn't make that much sense. It doesn't really add up.
and there's not a lot that happens. You know what I mean? This is it's not anything, really, not much of anything. What's fun about it, though, is how these people have to eventually pull this off in the third act as everything is going wrong. You have one actor who gets drunk, but he has to be a zombie, so you have the director holding him up. You have the director who now has to play the role of the director because his director got in a car accident. And his wife has to play the role of the makeup woman because the makeup woman actress got in a car accident. And the director now gets to kind of exercise a few of his frustrations out on the
Oh my gosh,
actors.
it's so funny when he
Yeah,
goes off on them.
yeah. So I think that's one of the goals of the creators is to show sort of like a house falling down and somebody running around and pulling it up with sticks, right? Just kind of sticking sticks in the right places to make sure the house doesn't come down. And in the end, it stays up. Miraculously, it stays up. I think that's part of the fun of it. I think the other goal of the creator is to create a sort of irony in the audience, create an ironic relationship with the audience in which they are going to give you a bunch of facts or a bunch of awkward moments or a few awkward moments. And then you, in watching the third act, get to explain what that was, right? So there's an awkward moment when the costume lady suddenly starts explaining her martial arts lesson. They're in the middle of a zombie attack, and they all pause and start talking about how to
Their
do
hobbies.
their hobbies. Yeah,
Yep.
and her hobby is this kind of martial arts escape thing. And they just have this conversation. And then they pause. And then they keep talking about it. And you're like, why is why is this happening? And then what ends up what you learn is one of the actors gets constipated and they need to take care of that, and so they just hold up a sign behind the camera that says improvise, we need a few minutes. And that's why it's so awkward. Or when the director who is now playing the director in the film, he's when we first see him, we hate him. He's just vicious to this woman. He slaps the male actor. But then when you see in the second act this director who's a very sweet guy,
Yeah, he's one of the
act,
nicest guys in the world, right? He's
yeah,
always put upon, but he just kind of he doesn't even shake his head. Like you could just see in his eyes that he's shaking his head, but he doesn't. And he just kind of moves it forward with whatever issue anybody's having. Like, okay, yep, we can deal with it. We can go. We can, yep,
yeah,
uh-huh.
yeah, he's put upon. But then so then you understand how difficult the two lead actors are. And so that scene where he's so mean to them and we hate him so much, suddenly like, oh, thank God he had the opportunity to get some revenge on these people. And when we learn that it's actually mostly improvised, that moment, it makes it all the more delicious. And so I think those were the goals of the creator. The goals of the creator were, let's see how many weird things that kind of don't make any sense that we could drop at the audience's feet and how willing they are to pick them up 30 minutes later.
I had to make a low budget film within a film within a film, and I, I think, and then on everything you said as well. So to show that it's funnier on the backstage as opposed to the front stage, all that. I completely agree, Tom. I think you nailed
Thank you.
it. So how do we think they did with the money they had?
I think that they're great. It's according to documentation, according to a few sources I've read, it seems like they were working with 3 million yen, so about 25 grand in US dollars, and they made what 28 million US dollars, yeah,
Yeah.
or the
Hmm.
equivalent of 28 million US dollars. So in terms of profitability, that's excellent. And it also does everything it needs to do. I was actually shocked that it was made for $25,000
Right.
or the equivalent of that.
Yep.
Because the first act does look
Very low
cheap.
budget.
It looks very low
Very,
budget,
very. Yep.
but when you get
Hmm.
into the second act, it
It looks like a
looks
movie.
it looks like a professional movie, right? In which the low budget aspect of it is just there to is there in context with the high budget portion of it. You would never suspect this movie was made for so little money when you see that second act. And so it looks really good. It looks um, they set up it's believable that that actor, the male actor, is actually a famous person. They have him doing interviews on television, and being very self-indulgent, and all the girls are kind of goggling over him and what have you. Um, and so I thought maybe he might actually be a somewhat famous pop star or something like that. Finding out later all these people are working for an acting studio. They're all student actors. Was very surprising. So I think that they did great. It looks like a professional movie. It looks like a movie that what would you say, billions of yen were spent on?
Well, we'll just talk in dollars
Okay, we
to
can
make
talk
it
in
easier for
dollars.
everybody.
Fair enough. It looks like a movie that maybe a low budget movie in terms of like with like a $3 million budget,
Yeah.
and it's 25 grand. So well done.
Awesome. Yeah. No, I think they did great. I think the first time I watched it, I don't want to say I wanted to turn it off, but those awkward moments are awkward. And if you haven't watched Curb Your Enthusiasm, or if you've not been in that awkward moment, like when she's explaining her self defense, or there's a few other ones towards the end of the zombie film where they need to wait until I think the wife calms down because she's going a little crazy. So they do these weird pacing things, and if your vocabulary isn't with it, you're gonna reject this movie. So it was a little risky to go. I think it was 37 minutes is when we see the opening credits. So I think it was a little risky to go 37 minutes of low budget, awkward, intentionally. It's a little too strong, but poorly made film.
Yes, it's a big risk. It is a big risk because the first 37 minutes are not well made.
Right? Intentionally, like it's right.
Well, yeah, that's what they're doing. But you, as an
Hmm.
audience member, don't know that.
Right.
So it looks like they don't know how to organize beats, right? They don't know how to bracket scenes, mini scenes.
Nope.
They
There's
don't.
no plot.
There's no
Right.
plot, or
Or
barely a
vaguely
plot.
something about the director bringing zombies here, but it doesn't. There's nothing to latch onto as an audience member.
Yeah, you don't know who these people are. You mostly don't care. I mean, the whole thing seems to be you're supposed to be impressed by that. It's a one take, but you're not that impressed that it's a one take film. Um,
And then the second act, I think the movie drags a little bit, which increases the risk, right? First, you sit through 37 minutes of a poorly made zombie movie, and then you're kind of surprised, but once that surprise wears off, the second act they have to do so much setup, right? They need to establish the alcoholic. They need to establish the guy who can't drink water. They need to establish the pop star. They need to establish the well-known actor, the daughter, the wife. Even the producer guy, they need to make sure everybody understands that he knows absolutely nothing. They need to establish how many times did they tell us it's one cut, it's a live broadcast. Like they they
Yeah.
had to repeat that 100 times. Um, so the second act, I thought it dragged, but the third act, mm, it brings it all together so wonderfully. You're just, like I said before, you're rooting for these people. You really want this to be a success, even though you know it already was a success.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a good point. The third act is you're rooting for it to come together, even though you know it mostly came together. And this they have to load a bunch of guns in the second act, right? Which is also unusual. Typically, you load those guns in the first act, but they have to load the Chekhovian guns in the second act, and they're things like, oh, the wife is a really good actress and she reads her husband's scripts 100 times. So she knows all the lines, right? We need that, but there might be a problem here. We need to what other guns we need to load? We need to show that there's a crane shot. But we also
Right,
need to establish the relationship between the daughter and the father, especially that kind of photograph of the daughter on her father's shoulders, so that it becomes the daughter who is having a difficult time with her father right now, but they reconcile through the making of movies, which
right.
is, a lovely little thing.
That's the big emotional beat in this movie is the father-daughter
Mhm.
relationship.
Yeah,
Or I should say there's no other big emotional beats in
yeah.
this movie.
There's no. I mean, everything else. The other thing you can maybe could say is the famous actor who seems to be above it all in the end joins the pyramid to support the camera that has to be 8 meters up, in
Right.
order to. So what ends up happening is there's a crane shot in the last shot in order to show that there's God, what do you call it? A hex.
A pentagram.
Thank you. A pentagram on blood on the roof to make the zombies come. But the crane falls over when they're doing everything.
Oh, because the wife goes nuts and just starts attacking everybody. And
Yeah,
during that time, I'm pretty sure, is when the crane
the crane
falls.
gets knocked. Yeah, because she gets too far into her roles, and starts hurting people. And so they have to make a pyramid. And there's one actor, the lead male actor, is kind of above it all. And he ends up helping out with the pyramid so that they can get the crane shot by you know, standing on someone's shoulders. I do like how the credits had the behind the scenes of that. It's just a ladder.
Right.
It's this whole crane thing. It's a ladder. It's a step ladder. Go up the ladder.
Well, the credits are funny because the credits are the making of a movie, or the credits are the making of a making of the making of a movie, if
Hmm.
I have that count right.
I
So
think
it was
so.
it was almost like a fourth act of
Yeah.
seeing
Hmm.
the next layer.
Yeah.
hmm The other thing, I, I, I think I would have been very stressed out on set, but everybody looked like they were having so much fun on set.
Hmm.
They really did. That was another thing I think I enjoyed about the movie is everybody looked like they were having fun making the movie. It's almost like Mamma Mia or something. They looked like they were having fun there.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very light fare, right? And yeah, they all seem like they're having a good time. They each have their own little individual conflict, which is really really fun. Um, yeah, the drunk is actually he's a lot of fun. Oh, he has another emotional moment with his daughter, kind of.
I don't want to say that's
Then they're kind
a
of.
gun that never fired, if they
Yeah.
even count as a loaded gun, right? So
Hmm.
I wouldn't say it's an emotional beat because there's no payoff. It's just, hey, I kind of suck. Like that
Yeah,
was
yeah,
the
it's
whole
true.
thing. I guess the payoff is then he does it to the movie, right? He doesn't show up for the movie.
Yeah, well, yeah, which is a shame. You want his redemption there, but whatever. I like that actor a lot in the
Yeah.
yeah in the movie,
Yes.
and I like him spitting water on on the assistant director, and that being like like this guy can't handle it. Was that water? Was that what?
No, I think
Is
he
it just,
vomited. He
oh,
was
he
throwing up
vomited.
the
Oh, yeah.
sake.
Yeah.
That's why the guy was going berserk. It was so funny. My
Yeah.
gosh, right? That guy gets thrown up. He's like, "What is going?" It was he was kind of the nerdy one that got picked on by the lead
The
main guy.
famous actor, yeah.
Yep.
Mhm.
Oh. So what do you think, Tom? Would a budget have helped one cut of the dead?
We should see the French version. I guess that had a larger budget.
That would be interesting. So there was a French remake a year or two later called Final Cut. And audience, if you haven't seen one cut of the dead and haven't been listening, so it's not spoiled, I guess go watch Final Cut so you can experience this all again.
Yeah. um, I don't know. I don't think so. I think it's perfectly fine with the money they had.
So the first act, don't change it. Third act, don't change it. I think the second act, I don't know if you could have done. I don't know what you could have done differently, but it the movie stops
Hmm.
and it kind of drove me nuts. And the other thing that I would have really liked to see is more development of that father daughter relationship.
Hmm.
It's a little confusing. So audience, she wants to be a director and she's working on another movie, but is too into it, so she messes it up. And then the dad shows up and apologizes. That didn't make too much sense. And then it's almost a throwaway scene where he's looking at the pictures and crying, and then the wife walks in. Like that didn't connect
Yeah.
to any other scenes either. And it was almost like, well, we need this in here to have that final emotional beat, but it doesn't fit in the movie in any way. So I think if they were gonna spend money, and I don't even know what I mean by that because there's not like a direct thing you can do here. I would have liked to see the father and daughter not have a blow up because the father doesn't blow up. Like that's not who he is. But somehow give us tension there, and then them have a reason they come together. Right? She saves the movie multiple times, but he's still kind of mean to her on set until that last pyramid.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know how a budget would help that, but I think those are certainly flaws in the movie, right? And I agree with you. It once you realize we're going to go to the history of the making of the thing you just saw, it does it does die because you don't care that much about the daughter's problems,
Right?
right? You don't, and part of it is the fun of the first and the third act necessitates the second act, and the second act just you don't you know it's going to happen. You know they're going to pull it off. Um, the fun is how actually they did pull it off. And so a lot of these things like the all of this stuff is just setting it up. Like there's a drunk guy, there's a guy who's for some reason can only drink soft water, otherwise he immediately defecates.
Well, he emailed Tom. They
He
knew
did email.
that.
Yeah. Um, things like that. So I agree with you. And I think kind of grounding it maybe emotionally in the daughter father would have been a really good idea. I don't think they didn't think of that. But like you're saying, that he's looking at these pictures and crying in one scene, and it's like, why is he
Why is he
why is
upset?
he
The daughter still lives with him.
Yeah.
He's on her movie set.
Yeah.
It's not like she's shunned him or something.
Mhm.
There was no. I wonder, and I know this isn't really what we're doing on Keep Making Movies, but I wonder if you took the second act and made it like the gathering the crew for Ocean's 11 or gathering the crew for Mighty Ducks 2. Have you seen Ocean's 11, Tom? Do you know
I
the
have,
scene?
yes.
Okay. So it's like kind of a montage almost of, well, they ask him to do the movie and he's like, oh, who am I going to get to do this? And then play the fun music and then he's going through all the different people and
Mhm.
establish it that way. I don't know.
Yeah, that could have worked, and then just cut it down.
Hmm.
That may be a thing, right? It's the three acts are they about the same?
I think it's 37-37
Hmm.
because the third act is about the same as the first act. And then I think the second act's actually pretty short,
Oh, is
even
it
though it
really?
feels as long as
Feels
the
really long.
others.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
guess it must just be. I think it's a good suggestion that there's just a sort of montage way of doing it, right? Like
Hmm.
they have the
Or
director,
Armageddon. They do it in Armageddon. Yep.
yeah, and you just you go from person to person. This is how you get. They kind of do that because you have the table read, and you introduce each person with the text on screen that tells you who
How
they
it's all going to
are.
work. And she does her little catchphrase to prove that she was a either former pop star or a
Some-
current pop star.
Something
Yep.
like that, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you do that a little bit, but I think your point is taken that it's just not fun. But
Right?
it seems like it's the medicine you need to take. You sometimes they talk about this in screenwriting is where if you want to do world building, if you're in a kind of imaginative space or a superhero space or something like that, they talk about eating your broccoli. You have to eat your broccoli before we can get to the ice cream. There just has to be this thing in the beginning where somebody plops down and goes, "Okay, here are the rules of this world." You get the rules. It's always awkward. It always kind of sucks, but it sets up the stakes. The problem with the way this movie, the fun of this movie, and it's also the problem of this movie, is that you have to stop eating ice cream to eat your broccoli in order to then again eat better
Eat
ice
the
cream.
ice
Yeah. So
cream.
it's just a really weird kind of it's an uncomfortable thing there. Um and I guess, yeah, maybe the solution is grounding it more in the daughter. Like the fact that he's crying, like you said, that doesn't make any sense.
Right?
They're there, they're
He
still a
can live
family.
together. They're watching TV together. Like,
Yeah.
I,
Maybe raise the stakes. Maybe she like leaves or something like that, or won't talk to him, or for whatever, because he's not a real artist or something like that. You know,
yeah.
which
I,
is cheesy,
right.
but that's why you do
Yeah.
cheesy things because they can be effective.
Yep. Well, what do we think, Tom? Does this make the official Keep Making Movies recommend list?
Yeah, I think it does. I think it kind of clicks all the boxes. Do you click a box? You check a box. I think it checks all the boxes. It's a low budget. It has an original take on something. I or yeah, I would say it has an original take on something. It's doing a
Yeah.
backstage thing, but it's doing it in its
Good
own
way.
way.
Yep.
It's fun of spirit. Um, I think we feel like we're communicating with the director pretty clearly.
Absolutely, right? I think we saw exactly what the director wanted us to see.
And so yeah, I'm gonna approve it.
Yeah, it's a yes from me. And Tom, after 20 episodes of Keep Making Movies, I have to say, Japan, they just nail this genre. Like, whatever this genre is,
Yeah.
they own it.
Oh yeah, they're oh god, like this the worst ones I think are like the American science fiction ones. And I think the worst ones are anything self-serious.
Yep.
I think maybe we can
Yep.
take a moment to say what is after 20 episodes, what is a keep making movies movie? Now that we've made the list and we look back upon it,
What is it?
I would say low budget, and so I would say what it shouldn't be, even though it's not a necessary restriction, but I think it's often a good restriction, is being really, really serious
Yeah.
kind of kills it.
Mm-hmm.
These movies, like low budget and like the sort of high art that's required of tragic observations on the universe, they don't go together well.
Yeah, they don't seem to have worked. Um, yeah, like you said, I don't know if that's a restriction, but we haven't seen it work yet.
Hmm. Yeah. So what would you say a keep making movies movie is?
I think the most important thing is we see what the director wanted to make without any studio or the suits, whatever you want to say, interference, right? That's requirement number one. And then usually that comes along with a low budget because unless they're already a bazillionaire, they're financing what they can finance. So that to me is number one. Are we seeing what the director wanted to do? Um, After that, whether it makes the recommend is how much did it make me smile? How much did it make me frustrated in a good way? Then how much did it communicate with me? How much did it talk with me as a movie?
Yeah, which is what you want from any of your movies, right? Regardless.
What do you think, Tom?
Yeah, I would say I think a keep making movies movie, um, it has to be sort of low budget and embracing the low budgetness of it, right? I don't think you want to hide from it, and I think this movie does that simply by making a low budget movie in a movie so that it justifies the low budget look of it.
Yes.
So I
Yep.
don't think you want to hide from the low budget, and you need to be sort of innovative in terms of what you're going to do in order to deal with the fact that you have a low budget movie. So there's a lot of times justifications for why we're in one room so
Mm-hmm.
often or one
Mm-hmm.
space. There has to be that kind of negotiation, I think.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think that negotiation is part of what makes me smile or makes me
Mhm.
frustrated or like I think that's a very important piece of.
Yeah, it's how well they do it,
Hmm.
right? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And not necessarily, like we're saying, not in an expensive way. If they don't need like some strange justification or some real justification, oh, now I understand, but make it work anyway.
Yeah, yeah. It has it how well the restriction works, right? And there's two sides to it. I think very often we're inclined to say big money studio committee written projects are kind of dearth of art or entertainment. I don't think that's true. I think very
Right. No,
often,
no.
you
Mm.
know, a lot of money actually can make really nice productions. I think writing by committee often can create good works. The early modern period in which Shakespeare wrote, most people wrote by committee. Most plays by that time, even some Shakespeare plays, were kind of written by more than one person. Um, However, what makes these movies fun, or what makes these movies of a genre, is that you get a sense of the auteur, the individual creator, the individual director, but who's so restricted because of that person working individually that they have to make their handicap their focus. And I think that's the thing. The handicap becomes the focus. The bug becomes the benefit. And how well they do that is what quality the movie is.
I like that a lot, Tom. 20 episodes. I think we finally figured out what a keep making movie is.
Yes. And we'll see if it's consistent in the 21st episode or not.
Well, audience, it's official. One Cut of the Dead has made the list. So please, Shinichiro Ueda, keep making movies. Audience, what's your favorite movie by Ueda? Looked like there's some fun titles out there. I definitely want to read some other ones.
You can rate and review this show anywhere fine podcasts are available. For those viewing in YouTube land, if you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the Talking Studios channel for all our exciting content, and follow us on social media at Talking Studios. Check out other shows by Talking Studios, including Talking Pictures Trivia, where we explore movies through trivia, Limited Lexicon, where we play through text-based adventure games, Get the Point, where we slowly reveal a movie poster and try to guess which movie poster it is, and Adapt It, where we explore adaptations in various forms. Got a question for us? Call the Talking Studios hotline at 201-467-8679 and leave a message. It may be featured on a future episode. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to Keep Making Movies, wherever fine podcasts are found.
That wraps up season 2 of Keep Making Movies. Please stay subscribed, and one day you'll be pleasantly surprised that another episode of Keep Making Movies will pop into your podcast queue. In the meantime, audience, please keep making movies. Wow, Talking Studios